Russia is absolutely at war with us, whether we want to believe it or not. Where he did everything except say, yes, of course that drone in Leipzig was from us, because he talked about we are going to destroy all the things that support Ukraine in this war. I mean, those are the words of Lavrov. And the drone that failed to go off there in Leipzig, of course, was very close to one of these big gigantic Antonovs that was loaded with ammunition.
It's my immense pleasure to welcome back former Lieutenant General Ben Hodges to the channel. He will be familiar to many of you, not just from the interviews here, but from the extraordinary appearances he does right across the media. He is a retired US United States Army officer who became commander of United States Army Europe in November 2014, held that position for 3 years until retiring from the army in January 2018. You will also know that he is one of, I would say, the strongest voices, pro-Ukraine voices in the expert community. And indeed, we are going to touch upon Ukraine in today's conversation, but we're also going to talk about the hybrid war. We're going to talk about Korea and the latest extraordinary statements that are made. We're going to touch upon interceptors, Iran, the whole global picture, because this is a war on many fronts. Ben, welcome back.
Jonathan, thank you very much for the privilege.
It's always an immense pleasure, and I should remind the audience as well, if they appreciate these materials, do please help make them happen through their generous support on Patreon, Buy Me a Coffee, and GoFundMe, etc. I say that because I'm just about to head to Ukraine, and quite apart from the exquisite cakes that I want to treat myself to, I think the interviews that I record when I'm there are of some importance, and if people think so too, please do help support the channel. Right, with that little plug out of the way, let's dive straight in. Well, I have to tackle this one straight up because it's going to be flooding our news feeds this morning. And that is the extraordinary statement by President Trump, waxing lyrical about his dear friend Kim Jong-un. But it seems that he has now thrust South Korea into the ambiguous ally zone, or has he actually thrown them fully to the lions? What's your take on this?
Well, of course, it is a bizarre turn of events, or at least something that I never imagined would happen. I think we're going to learn more over the next few days about what brought this on or what motivated it. It seems that Undersecretary for Policy Bridge Colby, this is going to cause him to have to rethink all of his talk about China as the great threat and how we need allies in the region. And here, the president has basically said that one of our most reliable allies is maybe he puts them in a different category. So it's frankly it's confusing. Now, I did hear just earlier today from someone that had spoken with a former official from the first Trump administration who said that Trump was bringing this up all the time, even back during Trump 1. But back then in the first administration, you had people who were able to push back and say, no, this makes no sense. We're not going to do that. There is nobody now that has the kind of ability and courage and uh, gravitas to tell the president, no, we're not going to do this. So not a good sign. The Chinese must be popping champagne corks. Um, let's see, because the U.S. was also looking forward, I think, anticipating some help with South Korea on shipbuilding. We're looking for other places to increase shipbuilding capacity. I would imagine this will be affected as well.
It's extraordinary, isn't it? And I have to put my little pro-Ukraine bit in here as well. North Korea, as we speak, has already provided troops to help Russia take back Kursk. North Korea has been providing ammunition at an enormous scale since my estimate is about 2024 at least, if not earlier. Up to half of Russia's traditional arsenal of shells are now provided by North Korean factories. And just in recent times, it's been rumored that up to 50,000 new North Korean troops may well be injected into the fight and start fighting on the territory of Europe, because Ukraine is Europe. This would have been inconceivable just a few decades ago. The idea that North Korea invades Europe would have set alarm bells ringing. So this is yes, Trump is a major problem here. But it seems that there's a general problem in not dealing with the reality of this. But this gets worse, surely, because if South Korea is essentially abandoned to its fate, and if they refuse to push back against North Korea, they refuse to aid Ukraine. What lesson should Europe take from this? That if such an ally, such a traditional ally, is abandoned, Europe may well be abandoned with exactly the same sort of flick of a social media post.
Well, I think that more and more European leaders are finally coming to the conclusion that under this administration, the United States is not as reliable as has been the tradition over the decades. Um, we don't have to have 300,000 troops in Europe anymore. That's not necessary. But the idea that the U.S. would always defend its interests in Europe was one of the anchors of stability and security in Europe. Now it's not clear what the president thinks our interests actually are in Europe, and if that's in question, then and given that he is so transactional in everything he does. I think European leaders need to be doing everything they possibly can to be prepared to defend themselves without significant American, I can't believe I'm even saying this, but without significant American participation, because we do have enormous interest in the stability and security of Europe. Europe is our biggest trading partner. It's the biggest market. It is important for intelligence sharing. It's the bases that we have. I mean, look how the Navy is struggling now in the Middle East because we've lost some bases. Can you imagine if we did not have Ramstein or Crete or Marun in Spain? All of these places are so important for us, and yet the president doesn't seem, and his Secretary of Defense, Mr. Hegseth, they don't seem to appreciate or care about that. So Europe needs to be prepared. And by the way, it can defend itself against Russia if you add together all of the economies, the wealth, the technology, the populations, the industries, etc. It dwarfs whatever Russia can muster. But what's lacking, of course, is that sense of urgency and political will.
And that is an extraordinary thing, isn't it? We were going to tackle this later. Let's bring this forward. I think this is important. If we're not prepared to name Russian aggression for what it is, if we're not prepared to arm ourselves accordingly, push back and actually make it painful for Russia, every time they do one of these things. There was a great commentator on French TV over the weekend whose name I didn't record, unfortunately, but he said basically this: every time we even suspect Russia's done something, we need to smack their interests hard every single time. Well, we're not doing that. And you mentioned off air the Leipzig terror attack, which is absolutely was. Weapons grade, military grade explosives on a drone seemed to be certainly trying to take out a transit plane in one of the most important civilian and military transport hubs in Europe. This is no longer a hybrid war, surely. This is a direct military threat to Europe, and we still have this failure to categorize in our minds, to see aggression for what it is. I know this is something you were keen to explore.
Well, you're right. This Leipzig event is quite a topic here in Germany. I was on a German TV talk show just this past week, and this was one of the main topics that was discussed. And there are still really good, well-intended, intelligent, well-educated people that are reluctant to say, well, we don't know for sure it was Russia. And the tendency is to treat each of these incidents as a crime scene where you have to have perfect evidence to confirm, and then as if you're going to court someday, rather than saying, okay, the chances are about 95% all of these are at the behest of or directed by or funded by Russia, even if there's not a Russian soldier waving a Russian flag at the controls. We know this. And so exactly what your French friend said, until we figure out how to inflict consequences on Russia for all of these things, whether we're talking about drones violating airspace, and by the way, they just shot down another one in Romanian airspace, I think it was yesterday, um, or the Shadow Fleet vessels out there operating illegally in the Baltic Sea and the Black Sea, the sabotage, the disinformation. Until we inflict consequences on Russia, it's only going to increase. And I think that's kind of how we get into eventually a more traditional shooting war because the Russians can see that we still can't get our shit together. I mean, there are big debates about who has jurisdiction over drones over an airport. What do we do about it? And instead of saying clearly these are violations of sovereignty and they're threats, and we have to do something about it. And there's a lot of tools and technology, by the way, Jonathan, that could be used. I mean, when somebody says, "Well, how do we know where the drone came from?" If we can measure to the second when a solar eclipse is going to happen, or when we can see there's a meteor from a million light years away headed that's going to pass within a million miles of Earth, surely we have the ability to backtrack where a drone came from and then do something about it.
I think that's definitely the case. We'll touch on that more. And I think the difference there is court grade material versus intelligence material, and treating things as you say a due process rather than national intelligence. I was going to ask you the question as to whether Russia will attack Europe, and then I sort of sat back and thought, actually, that's the wrong framing. Russia is attacking Europe, and it
Exactly.
is
Yeah.
already attacking hybrid and in a sabotage way at scale. And I logged it just this last 6 weeks, six unexplained incidents, including an ammunition factory just happening to explode in Italy. And it just happened, completely coincidental, but that ammunition factory also happens to supply Ukraine. So I put this question to you. In your view, are we already under attack at scale?
Yeah, Russia is absolutely at war with us, whether we want to believe it or not. Even though there's not necessarily Iskander missiles flying into Bremerhaven or Rotterdam or Antwerp or some other port, the fact is Russia is using many of the tools of war against us. And they can see that we don't know how to respond to it or how to deal with it, or and you definitely will get, I would say, a majority of political leaders and a lot of people will say, oh, we don't want to provoke the Russians. And I think what provokes the Russians is a weakness or lack of reaction. And that's what causes them to do even more. I mean, so if we change the framing to will Russia attack to exactly what you propose, that Russia is already at war with us, then if our political leaders can explain that to populations and then convince them that dealing with it now is how we prevent a traditional war involving hundreds of thousands of troops and destruction of more European cities. Uh, that this is the best way to deal with it, but that will take some political courage. We can't even we can't even figure out in Germany how to. There was a huge. Let me say it differently. There's a big debate in Germany about whether or not to shut down the Russia House in Berlin, which is one of these so-called cultural centers. And part of the reason is they're worried that, oh my gosh, well, then the Russians might retaliate by shutting down the Goethe institutes. They're in Russia. So what? Let that happen. These are the kind of things that can be easily replaced. European cities and tens of thousands of lives cannot be easily replaced. And I would encourage your listeners to check out Alex Finley on her Substack. She just wrote about this recently. It's worth the read.
Definitely. Oh, I'll pop that into the link into the description of the video. And it seems that these traditional scenarios are clouding our thinking, expecting a full-scale incursion, even in the analyst community that we both follow, endless repetition of the so-called Nava scenario. But do these things really cloud our thinking? We're precluding extraordinary curveballs, high-risk surprises, um, precluding scenarios, which a friend of mine, Bob Seeley, talks about, and which I've talked about on the channel for a couple of years, which is that actually it's far more likely that we're going to have to face a hybrid war at scale. And we're going to have to get over this categorization problem, all the way up to potentially having drones smashing into European airports, logistics hubs, actual kinetic explosions going off, no one claiming responsibility. We're running around like headless chickens when we're actually at war. At that point, I'm guessing that NATO as a structure, if it does not act decisively and unambiguously, that almost destroys any belief in these security institutions. We know we know that actually Putin's number one aim, or aims, let's say his top five aims, are to destroy NATO, destroy the EU, destroy US hegemonic global power, and of course absorb Ukraine. So this would all fit, and a sort of European hybrid Pearl Harbor scenario absolutely aligns, it seems to me, with Russia's primary objectives. But what are your thoughts?
Well, there was a couple of quotes that came from Lavrov that came out over the weekend, where he did everything except say, yes, of course that drone in Leipzig was from us, because he talked about we are going to destroy all the things that support Ukraine in this war. I mean, those are the words of Lavrov. And the drone that failed to go off there in Leipzig, of course, was very close to one of these big gigantic Antonovs that was loaded with ammunition going to Ukraine. So I think that the alliance has a role here in terms of being a framework and platform for discussing how do we respond. But the nations still have to respond. They have to protect their airspace as well. It can't be a NATO only. It has to be a national response. And I think, you know, it wouldn't be too hard to figure out the economic impact that every day that Frankfurt Airport is shut down or Copenhagen Airport is shut down because of drones flying overhead, or the port of Constanta is disrupted, how many millions of euro or krona or pounds are lost because of that. And I don't know that if people are making the connecting the dots on this is not just some knucklehead out with his in the park flying his little quadcopter around having fun. This is malicious intent by Russia. And I think making it a priority to stop this is a responsibility of our leaders. Now, I alluded to technology a little bit earlier. Part of counterterrorism and counterinsurgency is developing pattern of life, trying to figure out where the bad guys are, because the bad guys are not going to stand out in public with a flag and say, hey, I'm the bad guy. So if you have the tech, and the technology does exist now, it's just you got to be able to string it together and using the appropriate artificial intelligence to help accelerate the analysis, you can backtrack where did the drone come from. And you can start seeing, is this something that came out of deep in Russia? Not likely. It probably came out of off the deck of a Shadow Fleet vessel. We know that's already happened. Or it's being launched from some field outside of a city or wherever. And you start identifying these places, and then you target these places with law enforcement or military forces somehow to begin finding the archer. It's great to shoot down the drone, but that doesn't solve any problem. You have to find the goddamn archer who launched that thing, and you take them out and you find their network. And and then of course you have to sort out jurisdiction. Is this a police thing? Is this Interior Ministry? Is this Defense Ministry? Um, I don't feel that that's happening anywhere.
And this is a point which we've been making on this channel for many years, that taking out the archer is key in Ukraine as well. And as we approach the winter, it does seem that Ukraine does not have the interceptors that are required to not only protect its citizens, but actually protect its critical infrastructure. This certainly is a US failure, but it also seems to me a European failure, because Yes, the PAC-3s are not being provided, but we're not providing Taurus, Tomahawk, and other classes of munition which could be used to take out the archers at source, the silos and the launch points for this Russian assault upon Ukrainian territory.
Yeah, well, obviously for me as an American, it's I'm very unhappy and disappointed that we have failed to deliver these kind of capabilities to Ukraine because it's in our interest to do so. But we failed to do it even during the Biden administration, which was very good about, kind of unifying the support for Ukraine. And we did provide a lot back then, but it was always hamstrung by the lack of a desire to actually help Ukraine win. And so we didn't deliver enough to be decisive. Now, the Trump administration, where the Vice President Vance says that one of their greatest achievements was stopping aid to Ukraine. Um, so I think that this is not going to change, by the way. Trump has teased the Ukrainians because he can see that they're so desperate to get Patriot that he this promise to let them have the license to make Patriot. That was a total surprise to industry, by the way. They were that was news to them when the president said that at Ankara. But they teased the Ukrainians just enough to have leverage over Ukraine because Ukraine is so desperate to get interceptors, which is why they were willing to stop attacking these tankers with Kazakh oil in the vicinity of Novorossiysk because Vance asked, "Hey, please don't hit these things. This is American companies," and which is unbelievable to me. But nonetheless, that's where we are. But what's also shameful, I mean, the technology for Patriot entered the Army's inventory back in the 1980s. So while the actual interceptor itself has gone through evolutions, obviously, this is not some new unbelievable technology that nobody else in the world can do. And I think the fact that there's no comparable European system for the Patriot interceptor is really a shame on all of us. Um, there are plenty of capabilities, long-range precision capabilities that can be used to hit the factories where Russia's long-range weapons are launched. And I predict that Ukrainians are not going to sit around and wait for North Korean missiles to start flying into Ukrainian cities, that they are going to make life miserable for North Korean missile crews as well, sooner rather than later.
Extraordinary, isn't it? And I think you've highlighted there in measured term, but something which is an absolute moral travesty, in fact, a slaughter that is being enabled for the most grotesque reasons to protect oil company profit margins, to sort of call that out. But it's not just Ukraine that is abandoned to its fate to either sink or swim based on its own will and technology. Taiwan seems to be in that area as well. And this is something which is difficult and very easy for our leaders to ignore. But it seems to me, at least, that China is quite happy to keep these wars on the boil, whether they be Iran or Ukraine. They're quite happy to supply both sides, giving some advantage here, some advantage there. But actually, the end result is a world that is on the edge of catastrophe. Could this be a Chinese strategy that they see it while this is going on, while they're feeding the flames, it makes their eventual invasion of Taiwan more assured? The more chaos there is, the more depletion of interceptors and US capability, the more chaos there is, the more, let's say, guaranteed is their future invasion and occupation of Taiwan.
Well, I don't know what was discussed, of course, between the president and President Xi when he was in Beijing a few months ago. But I am sure that this administration would not be willing to fight over Taiwan. Um, maybe that was conveyed directly, indirectly. I don't know how, but I don't get the impression that this administration would be willing to go to war over Taiwan. And then yesterday, of course, we saw the announcement that the only aircraft carrier in the Pacific is being moved now towards the Middle East because of this catastrophe of a war we have with Iran, and our Navy is so overstretched. So now, if this report is accurate, in a few days, we will not have an aircraft carrier in the Western Pacific Ocean. Uh, that what a signal to the Chinese that we're not prepared or we don't have the resources to actually deal with a Chinese attack on Taiwan. And I'm sure that somebody in the Chinese military's analytical branches is keeping count of how many Patriots have been fired, how many Tomahawks have been fired, how many other precision weapons have been fired. And they have a pretty good feel, because that's what we would be doing. They have a pretty good feel for what we might still have in the locker. Um, so that's a long answer to your good question. I think China sees increasing opportunity. Now, what I've been trying to figure out, Jonathan, and you and many of your listeners will have a better sense than me, but if you go back to November last year and this national security strategy and all that, and how the president basically divided the world up into spheres of influence. And he said, Europe, you're on your own. Uh, he didn't really call out China in a meaningful way. It was kind of, I got the impression from that, it was more like, we're going to just don't mess with us. As long as we have freedom of navigation and we can get access to minerals, it was almost like you do what you want over there. He's now he's big pals with North Korea, so bad luck for South Korea. He's pulling a carrier out of the Pacific, the carrier, um, and he has hesitated on the aid weapons package to Taiwan. I don't see a lot of goodness there in these other regions.
And with Ukraine as well, essentially, it's, you seem to be quite good interceptors, but really, you're on your own, I think is the message there. But we've been pointing out again for a while, ahead of many other people, um, that actually Ukraine has something that the US really desperately needs. In fact, the whole Western alliance does, and that is this interceptor technology. Ukraine are now developing solutions for what's so-called reactive shaheeds, which are jet-powered shaheeds, which actually it's thought that the majority of Russia's output of Gerans and so on will be these high-speed jet ones, which the current interceptors can't deal with. And we have another thing here, which is another exercise, yet another NATO exercise, another massive and humiliating defeat for traditional NATO equipment and tactics, where elite, not even elite, just Ukrainian drone units wiped them off the board. In fact, it seems that equipment that had been wiped out had to be sort of revived, let's say, magically, and brought back into the exercise just to keep it going, so that it wasn't sort of, a 5 minute humiliation. I don't want to be, too negative here, but are these lessons being learned? Are they starting to be incorporated? Because we now have ample evidence that the traditional way of doing things is simply not viable in the drone age.
Let me offer a slightly different perspective on that particular exercise you're talking about, because it is important, and it's certainly got all kinds of headlines about here we go again, another exercise where the NATO guys get hammered and by the Ukrainians. And there's no doubt that Ukraine is years ahead of everybody else. And we certainly, I would say all of us were a little bit slow off the mark to say, we better get good at this. Now, what happened in this case? As you probably know, and many of your listeners know, we have a training center at Hohenfels, Germany, just like we have the National Training Center in the desert in California and another training center in Fort Polk, Louisiana. And these are very expensive, heavily invested training centers where we put a lot of money to create, make it a instrumented battlefield so you can see and hear everything. You have what we call observer controllers, trainers who are at every level or with the units to observe them. And then there's an enemy force, the OP4, opposing force, is full time there. They're always the best battalion in the army because they go through these rotations every month. It's a different Army unit that comes through for training, but the Op 4 is there every time. So they practice and they're trained and they know the ground, and everybody hates them because you want to beat the Op 4, you know? And so that's the training environment that we create. It's the best training environment in the world. And so in this particular case, you have a brigade from the States rotates over for their 6 or 9 month rotation where they're in Europe. It's an armor brigade out of Fort Hood, Texas. And they go into the what we call the box for their 12 or 14-day rotation. And what happened to them is what has happened to every unit that shows up in the box, going back pre-Ukraine, pre-drone. You go in and you get smashed for the first several days because nobody's ready to operate at that level of intensity. And the Op 4 has electronic warfare, they have drones, they have all these things. And in this case, the Ukrainian unit was integrated into the Op 4. So you would ask, well, why wasn't the American unit at a higher level? By the way, they had hundreds of drones. It wasn't like they didn't have technology. They just had never been in the environment yet to learn how to use it effectively, which is exactly why we have the training center to do it. I remember when I was a battalion commander, I went to the training center. We got slaughtered the first week, but you get better with each passing day if you are a good professional learning organization so that by the end of the exercise, you're better. I'm making zero excuses. I can already hear some of your listeners going, "Oh, what a spinner." I'm just explaining to put some reality into it, that there is a reason for training. There is a reason for extra. These are not demonstrations. These are training where you learn how to do. So in other words, the U.S. Army and others, we are trying to do exactly what you were calling us out. I'm saying we, I'm not in the Army years ago, but that's exactly what they're trying to do. They're spending millions of dollars to help brigades learn how to do it. And the fact that we would have paid for the Ukrainians to come be part of the exercise, I think criticisms are deserved, but I would want it to be in the right context.
That makes sense as well. And also, information which perhaps not everyone is party to is that some of these exercises have been, dare I say it, spun intentionally, maybe even framed to look more disastrous because there's a requirement to push our political leadership, to scare them into becoming or taking a leadership stance. So I think there's an interesting little bit of let's say sort of optics there, which has a political edge to it as well. I don't know if that's the case in this particular one, but I certainly know the previous NATO exercises I was told was structured in such a way that it would create, let's say, a media environment to put pressure
I
on our
I don't
leadership.
I don't know about that. I mean,
Yeah.
it's bad enough just the reality of what we have done in the past for the large scale multinational exercises where you're driving all over Europe or up into Scandinavia or whatever. You have to plan things a year out in order to get the clearances to move and do all that stuff. So those are fairly um, what's the word, sketched out what's going to happen. At the training center, this is full force on force, thinking enemy, not following a script. If you screw up, you get crushed. If you don't plan the logistics right, you run out of gas. And so what they will do is once a unit has been completely flattened, then you do get brought back to life in order to continue to be able to train. I mean, it serves no purpose. Everybody's dead at day 5 of a 2-week exercise. To stop the exercise, you never have the chance to relearn or to retrain and get better.
Well, we're approaching the end, but I think there are two topics I want to touch on. One we pretty much touched on, so this may be a brief one, and then we'll end on Ukraine as we always do. The interceptor imbalance. We've seen this with the war against Iran, the huge expenditure of interceptors, but there's something that's perhaps not being talked about here, and that is that the authoritarian world, and unfortunately, I don't think we're looking at it in this way, but the authoritarian collective world is massively outproducing the arsenal of democracy, especially when it comes to missiles versus interceptors. Iran, North Korea, China, Russia. and to an extent, Iran and North Korea are supplying Russia, especially North Korea, with these offensive munitions. Should we should we be really quite terrified at the idea that democracy and its arsenal is in no way prepared for what may be coming, or what, as we said earlier in the episode, has perhaps already arrived?
Yes, we should be concerned. But this is about political will and priorities. The president's talking about going back to steam-powered catapults and aircraft carriers. That would be billions of dollars wasted undoing what we have now. And then he's talking about, hey, why is the tower on an aircraft carrier in the back on these new carriers? I want it moved back to the front. What a ridiculous, mentality that will cost billions of dollars. And hopefully people in the Navy and in the Congress will have enough courage to say, no, we're not doing that, Mr. President, because blah, blah, blah. That's money that's wasted that should be spent on other things. This administration, and by the way, the previous administration never did send the correct signal to industry, with the signal being money, say, I need you to triple the amount of what's being produced. And these are not hammers or nails we're talking about. These are things that have very complex supply chains. And the labor force is not somebody that you just pull out of the unemployment line. These are people that have to be able to work with technologies. We're still in the US, and I think it's true in a lot of places, but not everywhere.
We'll tackle the attritional war in our next conversation, because I think this is going to set the scene for the winter. It's going to be a terrible winter, and Ukraine cannot necessarily rely on its allies. Ben, thank you so much for coming back on. I think this is one of the most enlightening episodes we've done, and at a critical time too. Thank you.
Thank you once again, John, for the privilege.
Silicon Curtain couldn't happen without you. Sharing the materials the channel produces with your friends and networks certainly helps it to grow. Liking, commenting, and subscribing give the videos a boost, and your generous support through Patreon, Buy Me a Coffee, and GoFundMe help to fund the trips to record in Ukraine, to bring back the stories and voices to you that the mainstream media often ignores. Links to those, of course, in the description of this video. From the episode filmed outside the bombed museum of Chernobyl in Podil, Kiev, from the daily news episodes that shine a spotlight on Ukraine and its heroic defense in the face of Russia's genocidal attacks. We bring you unique interviews filmed in Kiev with extraordinary experts. We film in Odessa. We film in Lviv as well. We bring you episodes on culture and identity, on food and history. We film live on location and bring you the toughest, most complex issues explored with the very best voices that we can find on each topic. We talk to military experts and veterans to add depth to our reporting. And of course, we bring you unique voices from dangerous places. The week-long trip to Kharkiv in July, for instance, is a great example of this, and we still have many more videos from that trip to bring you. And your favourite YouTube experts and commentators are here every week as well, sometimes live from the field in Ukraine and sharing their first-hand experiences. We've built a good thing here together, giving a voice to the very best experts, the best people every day of the week. We've built authority and trust and are committed to sharing the truth about Ukraine with the world. So if you appreciate the work we do, the videos we share, the risks we take, then please help to keep it going. Help it to grow and flourish. Help us reach more people. Help us to help Ukraine achieve victory over the aggressor, Russia, and help freedom to flourish.